So in the last video, we learned that merit goods, they cause the markets to fail. And the market fails in the sense that they underproduce merit goods. They produce less than what they should have produced. And now in this video, we want to analyze a couple of government policies that can be used to correct this market failure. So the correction would require the government to come in and somehow encourage or incentivize the market to produce more than what it is already producing. So the government would want the market to produce more than this Q star that it is already producing. Now, in terms of what sort of government policy or government interference tools can be used, remember we have already talked about a few of the tools that the government can use. We talked about indirect taxes, subsidies, and price controls. Now, the issue with a merit good, the failure, is the fact that less is produced. So if you remember, when we talked about subsidies, we said that what a subsidy does is that it sort of helps the producers lower their cost of production and therefore encourages them to produce more. And in terms of a model of demand and supply, we said that starting from certain equilibrium quantity, if the government comes in and subsidizes a product, then the supply curve will shift to the right, and in the new equilibrium, the quantity produced would increase. So to correct the market failure caused because of a merit good, that is to correct the underproduction of a good, what the government can do is it can simply come in and start giving a subsidy on that product. That will lower the cost of production of the producers of this product. That will shift the supply curve to the right. So as compared to this supply curve, if the supply curve shifts to the right, then even though the consumers are misinformed, they bring in this demand reflecting their misinformation. But since the supply curve has shifted to the right at this new equilibrium, the quantity produced will increase. So it is pretty simple. The government needs to jump in and just start giving a subsidy. And if you visit or revisit the example that we used to explain a merit good, corona vaccination, then this policy makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are already suggesting that, look, if the government wants more and more people to get vaccinated, then they need to subsidize vaccination so that people can get it at a lower price, producers produce more, and so on and so forth. Now, the question in the A-level exam will, remember, always ask you to analyze a policy that can be used. And analysis simply means that you need to tell the examiner of any issue that you can identify with this policy. And the issue with the subsidy is the same generic issue, that it involves a lot of cost and therefore there is an opportunity cost. And you can bring in a few other of the generic issues that we learned about subsidies, that they will cause inefficiency because you are just going and telling the producer that, look, I will come in and pay you a certain amount of money in the form of subsidy. You don't need to pay. So that is where we say that these producers will relax, they will become inefficient, and they will not try very hard to minimize cost and so on and so forth. But I mean, you don't need to go into a lot of details. This is where you are applying what you have learned in the earlier sections to this particular topic. So you don't need to write a lot, but you need to be very precise. Underproduction takes place of merit goods. That is the market failure. Government wants to correct it. Come in and give a subsidy. Just tell the examiner, you know, that will shift the supply curve to the right, and therefore equilibrium quantity will increase. Now, what else can the government do? Now, there is a way in which the government can basically sort of correct the root cause of the entire problem of this merit good. And that root cause is basically the information failure, because remember, it's the information failure because of which this whole problem is created and the free market ends up underproducing a merit good. So if you want to get rid of this underproduction, this market failure, as a government, you can simply sort of get rid of this misinformation, or you can say that the government can increase the amount of information that is available about this product. It can educate and inform the consumers that, look, this is much better than what you realize. The government may hold seminars, the government may hold press conferences, or they may give paid advertisements on newspapers and TV and so on and so forth to get rid of this misinformation, or you can say to increase the amount of information that is available around this merit good. So if the people, they actually, they get better informed and they start realizing that this is much better than we are realizing, then they will automatically demand more than what they are already demanding, and the market will respond, it will produce more, and the government will get rid of this underproduction. Now the issue with this is that it is much easier said than done, because it is not easy to increase the amount of information. Giving ads, holding seminars, you need trained people who can do that, you need a lot of money, and then you need to wait. It's a long-term policy. So if you have to compare these two policies, remember subsidy sort of wins, because subsidy at least is a very quick solution. Today the government decides to give a subsidy on a merit good such as vaccinations. Tomorrow they can implement it, and maybe in 2-3 days you will start seeing the effects of that thing in the market. Vaccinations would start getting cheaper, and therefore more and more people will go and start consuming it, and so on and so forth. Whereas this other way, where you are trying to tackle the root cause and correct this misinformation, it sounds like the best way. You go and tackle the root cause, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of money if it ends up showing any results. Now, these two policies are enough for you to know, because as I said, the examiner will always ask you to analyze a couple of policies, but I want you to know about a third way in which the government can correct this market failure due to a merit good, a very important way in its own right. And you see, the thing is, again, the failure is that this product is being underproduced. The market, but you see, is still doing something. And the government is saying that, look, Q, this pinkish Q over here, this is the quantity that should have been produced. The market is producing Q star, but it is only leaving this much of production. So this is the sort of underproduction. So what the government can do is, it can leave the market and let it continue to produce Q star, whereas the government can jump in and produce the remaining amount themselves. So government self-provision. Let part of this merit good be produced by the free market, and the rest of it the government can come in and produce. Now this is an important thing to know, because sometimes the examiner will ask you, why are some goods in an economy partially produced by the free market and partially by the government? The examiner may give you some example that why are health services partially produced, or why are education services partially produced by the free market and partially by the government? Well, because they are merit goods, the market underproduces them, but the rest of this underproduction is taken care of by the government. So government produces whatever is missing, whereas it lets the free market produce the other part. Now next up, we look at the government policies that can be used to correct the market failures due to demerit goods. Now demerit goods, remember, these are the goods where we are saying that the market will fail by overproducing them. The market fails much more than what should have been produced. So to correct this failure, to correct this overproduction, the government would now want to come in and somehow encourage or incentivize the market to produce less than what it is already producing. Now again, going back to the few tools of government interference that we talked about, including taxes, subsidies, and price controls. Here, what the government wants is, it wants to force the market to produce less than what it is already producing. So therefore, it will come in and put an indirect tax on this particular product. Because indirect tax, again, remember, you just don't need to go into the details, but remember the basics of indirect tax. When the government puts a tax, the supply curve will shift to the left and the equilibrium quantity will fall. So again, no need to give the details of how this tax works, but just sort of apply it. The demerit good is overproduced, the government wants to lower the amount that is being produced, put an indirect tax on all these demerit goods. And this is exactly what the government does. The government would always put a tax on things like alcohol and cigarettes and all these things, demerit goods, things that the consumer doesn't fully realize how bad they are for them. Now the question is, this analysis part of whether this indirect tax, is it a good policy? Is it a good way of trying to lower the equilibrium quantity that is being produced of a demerit good? Now the answer is sort of a bit technical, but we have looked at that detail in one of the earlier sections, and it is a very interesting application. Now if you think of this example of cigarettes as a demerit good, and then think of this policy of putting an indirect tax. Now, economists have been telling the government for a long time that, look, using indirect tax to lower the equilibrium quantity of a demerit good like cigarettes, it's not a good policy. And the reason lies in the technical details that we know about indirect tax. And that detail relates to the idea, if you remember, we said that, look, when you put a tax on a product that has inelastic demand, then this inelastic demand means that these consumers of this product, they are very stubborn. Even when the price increases, then yes, quantity will fall, but it will fall just a little bit. They have inelastic demand. Now, in case of trying to correct the market failure, the overproduction of a demerit good like cigarettes through an indirect tax. Now, these cigarettes, they are inelastic products. They are habit-forming addictive products, so their consumers are stubborn. So if the government comes in and puts an indirect tax with the aim that, look, now the producers will pass it on, the price will increase, and therefore the equilibrium quantity will fall, they will be unsuccessful, because since the demand is inelastic, even though the producers will pass on the tax burden, the price will increase, but the consumers of cigarettes, they won't be discouraged. They have inelastic demand. Only a few of them will reduce the amount of cigarettes they are consuming. So that is the analysis that you can include to make a beautiful answer, that theoretically, put an indirect tax, the supply curve will shift to the left, the equilibrium quantity will fall, you can correct the overproduction of a demerit good. But these demerit goods usually are products with very inelastic demand, so therefore as a result of an indirect tax, the price, it does increase quite significantly, but equilibrium quantity, it falls, but it falls just a little bit. Therefore, indirect tax, it won't be very successful in lowering the equilibrium quantity. Now we can keep on extending this issue of whether indirect taxes, they help reduce the failure of demerit goods in very interesting ways, and I want to add one over here in a very brief way. And that is where the government comes in and tells the economists that, look, maybe you are right. Maybe these consumers are stubborn, and therefore when we put taxes on cigarettes and demerit goods, they keep on consuming in spite of the fact that the price increases, the quantity doesn't fall significantly. But that gives a good reason to the government to put a tax on this product. Why? Because their argument is, and this is especially an argument that the British government would give, because they provide free medical services to their entire population. So the government's argument is that, look, we will still put taxes on cigarettes, although people will not lower the quantity they consume, but through these taxes, they will have to pay us a sum of money. We as a government will earn a revenue, and we will then use this revenue to give these people the seemingly free healthcare service that they will all require when they get old and get sick because of the smoking habit that they had. So this is where the government tells the economists that, look, we know the equilibrium quantity will not fall, but then they will have to give us a lot of tax. We will keep that tax revenue, and through that money, we will provide health services that they will need in the future. So in a way, it seems like, that health service is free, but the government has its own way of making these people pay for the health service that they will require when they get, unhealthy because of the smoking habit. But I mean, you don't need to go into all of that detail, but just remember that indirect tax is one of the policy tools, and the other policy tool to correct this overproduction of a demerit good, again, keep it simple, just go to the root cause. The root cause is misinformation. The consumers don't fully realize how bad this product is for him. That is why they are over demanding it and market is overproducing it. So you want to correct this market failure, you just correct this misinformation or add more information to the consumers of this product. Inform the consumers of cigarettes, the smokers in this case, of how bad this product is for them. Give them warnings, give them advertisements, and sort of make it part of school education in whatever other way that you can think of. And again, the issue would be that, and the government would need money to do all of this thing, and again it would take a lot of time to do all of these things. And if you forget about all of these policies sitting in the exam, and you have this question of how can the government correct the overproduction of demerit goods, then the easiest way to answer that is the government can just use rules and regulations. Rules and regulation means that the government can simply pass a law that look not more than quantity Q, whatever this quantity is. The government can just pass a law that more than that cannot be produced. We won't allow anybody to produce, let's say, more than 1,000 cigarettes. So that is the straightforward way in which the government can interfere and correct this market failure due to a demerit good. So that sort of wraps up a discussion of merit and demerit goods and the policies that can use to correct the market failures. Now, in the last video of this section, we will sort of try to sum up everything and build a broader picture around this particular topic that will help us answer a few more of the past paper questions.